Licensing Committee. We know that the time stands still in Rutland, and the second hand on the clock opposite me seems to have come to a halt, but we will continue nonetheless. Recording of council meetings. Any member of the public may film, audio record, take photographs, use social media to report the proceedings of any meeting that's open to the public. Protocol is there. It does not include recording members of the public. But I'm sure that anyone who wishes to do that is well aware of the protocol. I don't think there are any apologies. Thank you. If we could confirm the minutes of the Development Control and Licensing Committee held on the 27th of September. Mr. Huxley, thank you. Mr. Dale, seconded. All those in favour? And abstentions, please. Thank you. Item number 2, then, please. Any declarations of interest, please. Mr. King.
Chairman, as is my usual practice, as a portfolio holder for the council's assets, I will not take part in the planning part of the decision involving the library extension, and therefore, on a priority basis, please note I'll be leaving the meeting for that item.
Thank you very much, Mr. King. Do we have any item 3 petitions? Sorry, are there any other declarations? Sorry, Mr. Oxley.
Just the same, Mr. Chairman, that I'm a customer of all these stores in Corby, so my wife will probably be using all these stores in Oakham as in Wind, but so it's personally not prejudicial.
I think we've got a peculiar interest yet, Mr. Oxley. Mr. McInnes.
Yes, I'm a member of Cabinet at which the decision was made subject to planning permission regarding the children's centre. I've taken advice. I don't believe I'm predetermined my thoughts on this. I'm willing to listen to all the arguments. So I will say, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Wilby?
Same applies to me as a Cabinet member as well.
Thank you very much indeed. That makes that perfectly clear. Thank you. Mr. Conde.
Thank you, Chair. In a previous guise as a parish councillor in Kent, on a previous application, at the item 4, I voted against a previous one, not this application, a previous application. But I don't intend to let it colour my view on this.
Thank you, Mr. Conde. I'm sure that's absolutely in order. Any other? Thank you. In that case, petitions, deputations and questions. Thank you. And deputations relating to planning application. Thank you. In that case, we move on to the substantive items, which are the planning things. Before I ask the officer to present the report, I'll point out that Mr. Callaghan is here as the ward member. From the chair, I will pretend to give you exactly the same opportunity as everybody else. In other words, he may speak. There is no limit to the number of times. I'll give you time to get out, Mr. King, before we start. But he will not have a vote because he's not a member of this committee. But to all other intents and purposes, you are on equal footing this evening. Okay. I think Mr. King has now disappeared, so ask Mr. Hodges to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application to extend Open Library for a children's services activity. Just to set the scene on the aerial photograph, this is the library here, surrounded by Bull Lane at the back and Captain Street in front, just down from the offices here. Off Bull Lane is an access into Old Wind Close there, a series of inward-facing dwellings, and then over to the rear is Lodge Gardens, which has an access road that goes up in this direction between the boundary of the application site and the dwellings on that site itself. So this is where the extension would go. This is Capner Street here with the parking bays indicated at this point. The existing main entrance to the library at the front there. and the extension would be on, it is essentially the rear elevation, although it would be most prominent in public view from the side elevation. And it extends to about 200 square metres, which replaces an existing facility elsewhere, which extends to 150 square metres, so it's extending that quite considerably. And it constitutes about a 30% increase on the floor area of the library. Just to set the scene for interest, really, this is an aerial photograph of the library not long after it was built. You can see there wasn't a great deal of screening around it at that time. The red arrow is pointing to the mud and stone wall at the back, which is still there today and forms a screen to the rear of the library. Members will be aware of the planting area and the peacock in particular, which sits in this area here. So that was a photograph of the library just after it was built, before any landscaping was put around it, and then at the bottom you can see the landscaping has matured in the meantime, and that's the view today, well, yesterday. Now, previously, this was Catmore Street before the buildings were demolished to make way for the library, and that was these buildings on the right hand side. You can see the building there with the dormer, which is number 16, Catmore Street, and the boundary wall here. And then to the left of the picture is Ewell House, which was previously known as Judges' Lodgings, and those two buildings are listed. So all of these here were demolished, and you can see the building on the corner there that still stands, which I think is the wine shop, and you can see a lorry there emerging out of Burley Road. And when these buildings were demolished, this road and footpath was widened considerably to provide a wide footpath for the parking bays along this side. And that's a view looking back from the other direction. So this is now the estate agents on the corner of Mill Street and the sports shop just here. And you can see that I think this was a butcher's shop, as I was informed by the chairman yesterday. You can see there was a public house and other three-storey buildings forming a closure onto Catmore Street at that point. This is a plan that shows the conservation area boundary, which is this purple dotted line. So these properties here on Stamford Road and in Lodge Gardens are outside the conservation area, and everything else that you see on there is within the conservation area. This plan does show listed buildings as well, but they're quite clear. As you can probably see on the laptop screen, they're coloured pink. In particular, you've got the cottage with the dormers there, Ewell House there, and the front part of the wisteria there, which are listed buildings in addition to the older part of Catmore's house here. And then the buildings there on the corner of Burley Road and Ball Lane there are also listed. The extension, of course, would be here. So that's a view from the approach to the library from Stamford Road Junction. You can see the end of the retained old stone and mud wall there, which continues right across to the rear boundary. And you can just see there through the trees the corner of the building where the extension would be. That's a plan showing the existing layout of the library. So we've got Catmore Street at the bottom, front corner of the library here. And that's the view down the back. That's the elevation down the back, which you can see on the photograph would be there. Parking there for the mobile library, which you can see. And there are 5 spaces currently in that yard at the back, along that row where these vehicles are here. And there's 2 further spaces there, and the rest of this is grass, and that's the line of the stone and mud wall. And then you can see the wall to Lodge Gardens is quite a high wall, which is this one along here. So again, this is the corner of the library where the extension would be, and there's just a smaller version of it there showing where it would actually be. It would start from half a metre back from this corner at this position, and then it would come straight out. There would be a doorway between the existing building and the main fabric of the extension. So the extension would wrap around these 5 windows that you can see there, and 2 further windows on that return elevation. The roof would follow the line through with a similar parapet detail, and it would have roof lights that would be hidden behind there. And that's a view over sort of behind the camera on the previous one over to the modern stone wall, and the peacock is just over on the side there for reference. And this modern brick wall here would be removed to make way for another wall with a gate in it, which I'll come to later. So just to set the scene, you'll see from the report, these are the main issues that you can consider from a planning point of view, because you can only consider the planning issues in relation to this application. And you'll see from the report that other non-planning issues have been raised as part of the objections to the scheme, but they are not for you to take into consideration tonight. So these will be the four main areas that you must consider. So again, this is the extension on the corner. It's 14.5 metres this way, 13.3 in that direction. And then you'll see at that point there's a new section of wall which will come out to a butt, but not actually joined to the old stone and wood wall at that point. And then there will be a gate in there for rear access. A larger version of that now to make it a bit clearer. So this would be the entrance. This is the front corner of the existing library building here. So there will be a half metre setback, a glass screen with an entrance door, which will give entrance into the extension. We've got a multi-use area, wet play area, kitchen, WC, meeting room, office, and staff room. And then there would be a new doorway through one of those existing windows there into the main library building. But clearly there's three doors between the library and the main area of use for that extension. 2 parking spaces would be retained at the back there. I'm informed that they would be for drop-off purposes only. They wouldn't be for visitors or for staff at the library or the unit. And then in the back corner here, enclosed by a new 1.5 metre wall, there will be a small outside play area. And you'll see, just referring you to the addendum report, there's a further background there that's been supplied by the applicant, explaining how the facility itself will be managed, and that includes specifically setting out that small groups of children would be playing out there, mainly younger children, and they would always be supervised. So in terms of the elevations of the proposal, this is the north elevation looking effectively from Bull Lane. So you'll see that on the rear of the library at the moment, there's a garage with this large concertina door, and that's the entrance into the site, and you've got Catmore Street and the trees in the background. So this is the concertina door here, and the extension is actually set about 13 metres further back than this corner that you see there. So there's a large setback to that building there. And you can see that the extension would be built with the eaves lining through and the floor level lining through, so that at the rear, where the land is lower than it is at the front, it will be built up on a brick plan. And this is the east elevation, or the rear of the library, if you like, where the extension will be. Again, it's set in half a metre there. It will come out towards the camera and return. And the rear elevation here is coincident with that step in the wall at that point. And the door to the boiler room that you can see on the drawing there is that element there. And then just taking a step further back from that view, again from close to the junction with Stamford Road, you can see that that particular view is well screened by the wall and the existing trees on that side. So the south elevation to Catmore Street, as I explained earlier, this is the entranceway which would form a break between the corner of the main library here, and then the extension would run across and return back. And then there's timber cladding. The windows have been designed to reflect those in the existing building. The building would have a brick plinth, and it would have vertical timber cladding. There is vertical cladding on the existing building at the moment, above all of the windows. And that's a three-dimensional mock-up that's been produced by the architect to give a bit better idea as to what the extension will look like. You can't really go on the colour of that timber there, because, as you'll see from the report, the recommendation is that the actual finished materials are reserved for later approval by condition. So you'll see that these trees sit quite well in front of where the extension would be, softening its impact from the street. Again, that's another three-dimensional model. So this dark line is effectively the line, the continuation of that is the line of the stone and mud wall where this new section of wall would have butt at that point. And that's the wall at the back of the gate that would enclose the small play area. You can see the roof lights in there hidden behind the parapet. Again, that's a general view back from the Stamford Road junction, showing how the extension would be well screened and softened by the existing landscaping in that area. In terms of the residential amenity issue, which was one of the other issues that was raised in the report, this is the location of the play area at the back of the extension. The nearest residential properties, and I think that's a residential property there, or we're assuming it is. You've seen the high wall here and the trees in between along this boundary. There's a driveway in between that property and that boundary wall, indicated by the red line. The distance between the play area and that property is 45 metres. And from the corner of the existing library building across to number 1 Alwyn Close, there's a distance of 15 metres, and that's shown on the photograph at the top. And importantly, you'll see from that photograph that this property on Alwyn Close turns its back to Bull Lane, and it has its main facade over on the other side, over in this area. So for that reason, it's considered that the small area of supervised small groups of children is unlikely to detract from residential amenity. Again, that's an aerial photograph just showing where that play area would be in relation to number 1 Alwyn Close and the property on the other side of the wall. And you can see there the driveway in between the two, plus the trees and boundary wall in there. In terms of parking, the applicants now confirm these 10 spaces behind the wall on, this is Stafford Street here, the offices opposite. 10 spaces would be reserved here for visitors to the centre during office hours only. There will be no parking there for staff, and those are those spaces that will be reserved. They're literally just across the road. And to compensate for the loss of those 10 spaces, there is a rearrangement of the parking spaces in this car park here, currently being undertaken to effectively replace those within this area. And that's showing from the library within 200 metres, just to illustrate that there are 4 public car parks within 200 metres of the site. Just to confirm what I've already said there. In terms of the town centre, the policy in the site allocations document does suggest, as the report points out, that in the town centre, parking requirements can be relaxed because of the alternative modes of transport that are available to get people to that location. So, in summary of the main issues then, it's a town centre location. It conforms with policy in terms of sustainable locations. It's easy to get to. It's not a site where you have to rely on access by private car, although facilities are being provided for that eventuality. In terms of the design, it's difficult to match brick on the library. I understand it's a Williams and Cliff brick, which was a local brick that's no longer produced. So it was decided by the applicant to go for a complementary material, correctly spelled, as the chairman pointed out to me, to use timber cladding, which does reflect the material that already exists on there, together with the pattern of fenestration that follows the existing building, and it's considered that that is appropriate, subject to the final approval of the actual finish of the material. In terms of the conservation area, I think our conservation officer's view was that the large damage was done when those buildings were demolished and the street was widened. There is some impact on the conservation area. there is a minor element of harm, but it's well mitigated not only by the public benefit of the facility that's being provided, but as you see from the photographs, it's reasonably well screened from the road with that mature vegetation that's now grown up around the site. And it's not considered for that reason that the scheme would have such a detrimental impact on the character of conservation area or on the setting of those listed buildings opposite as to warrant its refusal. Residential amenity, we've looked at that, we've shown where the play area is. It will be supervised when small groups of children are outdoors, and it's not considered that any noise from that source is likely to be a problem to neighbours, particularly against the higher background levels in the centre part of the town. And finally, highway safety, we just looked at that. Parking is provided, should it be required, and there's plenty of other town centre spaces available. So just in conclusion, then, those are the four main issues that you have to consider. Other issues that have been raised, like alternative sites, the management, the possible future expansion of this site, must not be given any weight in the planning decision. They are not considerations. So the decision must be based on the proposal, on its merits, as always, as it stands in front of you. So on that basis, I recommend approval.
It is the
No need to stand, Mr. Callahan, not my full counsel.
That's all right, okay, I shall sit. It is the belief of both local residents and Oakham Town Council that the siting of the Children's Centre is in the wrong place. Some of the concerns raised are that effectively the library is on an island with no on-site parking and therefore major impact from the point of view of traffic. Walking from the car parks, and it was highlighted that there are a number of car parks within 200 metres of the place, but that therefore, if there's increased walking, it means increased risk to families and particularly young children. There's no safe drop-off area in front of on the Campus Road, and as a result, there is going to be a temptation for Bull Lane to be used as a drop-off area. And this is majorly unsuitable due to the width and the proximity of the junction to the roundabout junction of High Street, Mill Street, etc. There's a cost implication. I didn't see whether that car parking was going to be free for the users, but if not, then there's a cost implication for the use of the centre. Whilst the benefits of shared amenity space is recognised, the mix of a library requiring peace and quiet with that of a children's centre, which by its nature is incongruous and likely to cause friction between the two user groups. The consultation with this has been very, very poor. Out of 7 houses in Oldham Close, only 3 received letters. These were received on the 23rd of September, with the Cabinet meeting being held on Tuesday, the 27th of September. Clearly, there was little interest in hearing other opinion. At a time when we should be reducing debt, it is not sensible to then spend a large sum of money building a new facility when there are already existing facilities that could be used. I think the Localism Act, whilst it doesn't have any bearing on this, it gave power to local authorities to have control where previously national government dictated policy. It follows, therefore, the county council should adopt the same approach and take seriously the opinion of the town council, in this case, Oakham Town Council, who voted against this project. We need to be asking ourselves, A, is the new centre going to be of great benefit to the community, in which case we should expect large volumes of persons and vehicles with consequent highways and residential amenity issues, which are not recognised in this report? Or is it only to have minimal traffic and pedestrian use, in which case the implication is minuscule public use, so then how can it be argued that the public benefit outweighs the damage to the conservation area? The report suggests that the answer to both questions is yes, which clearly cannot be so. In general, it is clear there's been insufficient public consultation. Little account has been taken of the impact to the enjoyment of the library. No notice has been taken of Oakham Town Council. The report is ambiguous. I request that the decision is not taken this evening and is instead delayed and put to full council, allowing more time to look into the concerns arising from this development and for alternative options to be thoroughly investigated and reported on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mathias?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Similarly, I've had conversations and correspondence with several residents. Seem to be centred around parking bays in Bull Lane and traffic in Bull Lane. So they're concerned about the increased traffic that this might draw. There is concern that I've been made aware of by mums, especially with small kids in tow, having to cross what are considered to be busy roads to get there, and some concern about playground noise. And indeed, I've had some correspondence where there's been a considered lack of consultation, as Ben has outlined. But Ben has put it so much better than me, so I concur with much of what Ben says.
Thank you very much, Mr. Byers. Mr. Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. Presently, the mobile library is based at Wes Park, where this extension is planned to go. What are the implications for deliveries to the library with regards to the loss of parking that is available at present? That's my first question. I also have very real concerns about the proximity of the development to the mud wall, which presumably is listed and protected. Is it not listed? Oh, right, okay, well anyway. It's part of the heritage of the town, and they're a very rare, it is really a very rare throwback to earlier days, and there are not many semblances of that left in the town. So I do have very real concerns about the proximity to that wall. I also have concerns about enlarging a building which already, I believe, is totally out of context for the centre of Oakham. It's an ugly building. I've never liked it, and this will just make it worse, in my humble opinion. Also, with regards to crossing the road, there isn't a safe place to cross from the west side to the east side without hovering in the middle on islands, and it's quite a busy road. So if members were minded to give permission to this, I would like to see some reference to enabling a safe way to cross the road to be part of the development. So that is a pedestrian crossing, a pelican crossing, to enable people to cross safely. And also, I take on board the points about the drop-off points, about drop-off parking. I think parking will be a problem. So to round up, I listen to what everybody else has to say, but I'm not convinced that this is going to be of benefit to the wider community.
Do you want to reply to your question about the library? Mr. Hundred, have you that information? Then go on.
I'm afraid I don't, Chairman. There is that large garage at the back, which I presume is available for the mobile library. So I'm getting a nod from people who know.
Mr. Cullen.
Thank you, Chair. I really feel strongly that I want to reiterate Councillor Oxley's points there. The crossing is not just across from Westminster, it's coming across the Burley Road as well. I think it's a slightly cavalier report from Highways regarding other modes of access from car parks, up to 200 yards away. These roads are very busy, and I don't think just putting one Pelican crossing from west to east would obviate the problem of dangerous routes to it.
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with some of the comments from Councillor Callahan. I have concerns, and I'll check back through the notes that I had received from DC. The material considerations, I believe that are prevalent here is the parking, the safety, obviously traffic. As everyone said, it's probably the second busiest crossing junction in the town. My primary concern. Parking, again, the addendum says there's going to be up to 15 parents coming to this, although they're saying there's going to be 10 parking spaces across at the museum. It's going to be uncontrollable, in my opinion. So parking to be able to drop drop the children off and accompany those children to this children's site, children's centre site is a serious risk. And in terms of that, we need to look at it seriously. I don't doubt there's a need for it. But again, my second material consideration is the cost of this. Is there a real need to spend this money? Is there nowhere else we can look at? But so
that is not material.
okay, well, going back, I agree with what's been said, and obviously I have empathy with some of the non-planning issues where some of the local residents think this is a done deal. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's the feeling that's coming on.
I can assure you from the chair that it is not a done deal. Do you want to come in on that? Yes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I've heard some of the comments so far this evening, and I feel I must caution members on some of the comments that have been received. You've spoken about your concerns about the highway impacts. There is no highway objection to this scheme. It is a town centre scheme, and I would caution you in identifying highway issues as a reason to go against the officer recommendation this evening. Highways has no standing objection on this matter, and you must take note of that. Parking provisions have been made for this scheme. It is a town centre scheme, and I would just urge some caution in considering the highway concerns with no standing highway objection.
Thank you. We'll take that legal officer's comments, of course. Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just ask for clarification. I was actually making a point from a standpoint of public safety, not from highways.
No, what I understood from your concerns, Councillor Condé, were that there being only one crossing heading towards, so I'm not sure which way you said, east to west, but certainly your view was that that was not sufficient. It is not a school building, it is a children's centre with very small children and parents taking them along. So that puts the highway comments into context, I feel. So I would certainly reiterate that there is no standing highway objection, and I would caution you in terms of taking that road. No pun intended.
I just wanted to clarify my point. Whilst I concur with the legal officer's comments, I still didn't, I believe, get a satisfactory answer with regards to parking the mobile library. And I believe that whenever there are deliveries being made to the library, that could actually have an impact on the surrounding area and the neighbouring community.
What I'm going to do is ask the museum library director if he could just give the committee that information.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to clarify, there are at the moment 2 mobile libraries that are parked at the Rutland library. Only one of them is in use. The main mobile library is parked within the garage, within the concertina area that you saw. The second mobile library is the one that was used by First Contact. It's now not in use and has been held onto by the service pending these changes in case it needs to be used, but there is no intention to retain it in the future, so that space will not be needed for it. So, and the deliveries to the library, which take place at present, are taken through that concertina area, so there isn't any impact that I'm aware of from these proposals. Those deliveries will continue as they do now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clayton. Yeah. Would you like to say, just in case there are any other details I'll refer to you? Mr. Wilby.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to try and add a little bit of positive comment on this move. I don't go to the Oakham Library very often because I live in Ryle, in one of the splinter quiet areas. I look at my own library and I'm always heartened to see the good mix between young children and old people, elderly people, in that library, and the great use that comes out of the whole community using that facility. When I visited the Oakham Library a couple of weeks ago, I was impressed by the amount of activity that was going on within it. from the use of computers to the use of library, for the discussion rooms and all the other bits and pieces. And, you know, I can see nothing but good coming out of enhancing it with the Children's Centre, with all the facilities that the library has to offer. I know these decisions are not taken lightly, and you will never ever suit everybody, but it would seem to me that by enhancing it and combining it with the Children's Centre, we would get an extremely good facility, which is good for the whole community, and particularly the young people in this area.
Any other member who wishes to comment? Mr. Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Flat roof in the conservation area, I'm not happy with that for a start. I wonder how far we have looked at alternative sites. Doesn't add up to me, won't go into the highways thing, but it just doesn't seem to be the right spot for me. Yeah, I understand what you're going to say. I think we're going to lose the view through to Bull Lane there, which to my mind is, I come in twice, 3 times every day up that road. You look through there and you've got pleasant surroundings and everything else, and then suddenly we're going to have a flat roof extension in there. Doesn't add up to me, Chairman.
Now, I know the legal officer is going to say, and I think you know this now, that we cannot do alternative sites. Do you wish to come in and reiterate that?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, again, just to reiterate, we are considering the application that's in front of us. It is very much a balancing act, and you all know that, but certainly the considerations about other possible sites that may or may not have been available is not what's in front of you today. It is this scheme in this location with the material plan considerations that are in front of you.
Mr. Costa and Mr. Lanning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stand ready to be slapped down at any moment by our legal officer. I am concerned, firstly, and I'd like an answer as to why so few of the neighbouring properties received any notification.
Could we just pause on that, and I will ask just pause.
Mr. Chairman, I think there may be some issue here between the consultation that was done to the council as applicant and the council as local planning authority. Council as local planning authority, which is all we're here to concern with tonight, did publicity in accordance with the code of publicity. So site notices were displayed, press notices were done in the local paper, and we notified as a discretionary matter some of the neighbours just across the road. So in terms of what you are looking at as members in making a decision on the planning application, your own code of publicity was entirely followed.
Okay, may come back on that, Mr. Chairman. So the planning office presumed to ignore 1 or 2 properties, but not all of them. Why?
The primary means that we notify the local population of the planning application.
Sorry, I'm suspending the meeting at the moment.
You're right. Sorry. Yeah, I've just put a thing in here, and I think.
We're going to get a little bit more air into the thing. The premises officer will deal with that. Mr. Cross.
No, I think the air idea is a very good idea, but it's very stubborn.
Yes. The chair was notorious for hot air, I'm afraid. On a farming night. But would you like to return to the topic in hand?
Well, I was waiting for further replies on why certain
yes,
I said you were patiently.
Mr. Bullen.
The way the council notifies population applications, the primary method is the site notice. And that's what we have to do to comply with the legislation. In addition, which we wouldn't normally do, on this application we provide a press notice in the local paper as well. So that's in addition to the site notice.
That's more than is taken on most applications. We then have a discretionary option of notifying properties with a common site boundary. In this case, a generous interpretation is made, and we notify people who are on the opposite side of the road, because there is no actual property that immediately abuts. So you could well argue that we consulted wider than the actual requirement in our own code. So that was done. The number of consultees on this is not that who has been consulted directly. It's not realistically feasible for a council to be able to consult everybody who may or may not consider themselves affected by better. I mean, a case in point would be the Aldi item, which probably affects, to a certain extent, most people in Oakham and in many of the surrounding villages. It's simply not feasible to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. I think that was a very, very good analogy. Right, another concern is the impact on the street scene. Oh, sorry. Another point is the impact on the street scene. As we can see from the plan here, it is actually going to double the length of that frontage onto Cabinet Street, and will have a serious impact, in my opinion, upon not only that conservation area, but upon the amenity value that we've already put on that area. And I think with that, I'll just leave it for a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lemmy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, if I could just say, remember, the first thing I did when looking at the application was to try and put aside the fact RCC is the applicant. Think of it that if this were coming from any other organisation or individual, how would we address it and look at the issues with regard to that and focus solely on the planning issues, the four of them which we've had put up here. And going through the four of them, as I would with any other application, thinking, is there anything against this which would give me enough weight to go against a recommendation from an officer? And then go, would it there be enough weight if it went into a planning appeal for it to actually be substantial? Because that's what we have to do with this. Treat it like any other application and give it the same weight and due consideration as any other one. And I look at the first issue which was highlighted was the design. Now, I would say, putting aside your own thoughts with regards to the 1970 application, the design is in keeping with what is there at the moment. It is only a 30% increase. The ridge height continues with it, so it does blend into the structure which is there. And I do know it is well screened from the road when you consider other applications we would say, sitting on this panel for a number of years, putting in my mind, comparing it to others. Impact on conservation areas. Yes, I would say there would be a minimum impact. However, given it is an extension of the building that is already there, and also, as it is stated in paragraph 17, the harm is weighted against public benefit. Well, it's a children's support services. I think that could be defined as a public benefit to have. So I don't believe on that consideration there is enough weight to go against the recommendation. Residential amenity, the play area is 45 metres across the road with a wall to the next property, and the library building 15 metres to the north. That, when I sit here, the hundreds I've probably sat on now and done planning applications, it's no grounds to turn down. It's too far. When we look at the scale of what I had before, there is no basis for that, I could say. And then we go into the highway safety. Now, I know what has been said by members. However, there are the 10 spaces reserved. It is, as what was said, a town centre development. And there are no highways objections. Now, if we were to reject this, if we were to reject it on highways issues, which is what I'm getting a sense from maybe members would look to, if that went to an inspector, they would throw it out straight away. It is very weak, and for us to try, in the past, to turn down applications on highways issues when there is no highways objection to it. So I think we would be inconsistent if we were to turn this down. And I know the residents' concerns, inconsistent in our approach to what we would do with other applications. So because of that, and because I can't see there being enough material weight to go against the officer's recommendation, I would be voting for it tonight, and I would be a proposer for it.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Many good points there from Councillor Lammy. I would say that we have turned, or at the very least deferred, an application before now, not that long ago, where highways had said everything was fine because there was line of sight visibility within an application, but they did not take into consideration that if there was a vehicle actually parked on the corner where there was a parking space. So, although yes, I take on board very much the earlier advice, then we have actually turned it down for that before. What I would say though, on a more positive note, along with what Councillor Wilby was saying, we do get a more robust future for the library service by combining it with other services. Representing Ketton Ward as I do, we nearly lost our library, and in the end, it's only by combining it with a village hub, the surgery as well is held there, an outstation from Uppingham, that we've been able to maintain that, that sort of fine service to the villages, and I think that that is something that should be borne in mind.
I saw Mr. Mathias fractionally before Mr. Maxim.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question because I do have some concerns about the appearance of this extension. You talked about timber cladding and that it's, I believe, a reserved matter. Is there any clarity that we could be given here as to what types of timber cladding that might be?
No is the short answer. It might be something like cedar cladding that would fade, or at this stage we don't know. We don't have the specific detail to be able to advise you on, and that is the reason that it's suggested, recommended as a condition related to approval.
Mr. Robson, I just wanted to make a point about the design, following on from Councillor Price. I believe that it is an ugly design. It is a design which is hoping to complement what is already quite an ugly building, whilst it isn't perhaps although I can remember that we have in the past refused applications because of the design of the building is not in keeping with its surroundings, and whilst it is blending in very well with the library, there are many who, as I said earlier, do not think the library is a very useful building to begin with. So I thought I'd make that point as well.
Mr. Pullen.
I'll just come back on the design and issues related to the conservation area. Your conservation officer advisor has been out to the site. He's seen that, he's seen the plans, he is satisfied with the design, is appropriate to the building in the context of where it sits in Oakham, and he is satisfied with the design solution. Picking up the materials, it's part of the reason why the condition is there, because when those details of that come in, that's something we will also discuss with the conservation advisor to make sure he is satisfied that they are appropriate to that location and to the extension to the library. So your conservation advisor does not have some of the, well, simply does not share the concerns that are being expressed in relation to conservation areas and design.
Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've got to congratulate our officers because they have made tremendous presentations on behalf of the applicant. Now, as regards the impact on the street scene, and Councillor Lammy referred to it being only a 30% increase. As we look at the plan, the facade facing Catmore Street will increase that facade by 100%. If we have another analogy, if this was Aldi sitting there in the library, and Aldi wants to increase it, what would we be deciding? Good question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we note your comment about the.
Congratulations.
Excuse me, through you, Chair, I actually think that is an inappropriate comment. Planning officers are doing their job and are not here to represent either the applicant or any other person in that matter. And I would want, again, point that out to members that you are the decision maker, you are weighing all of the material planning considerations and policy in the balance.
My apologies, my comment was taken in the wrong vein, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think you were referring to the professionalism, not the partisan aspect. Yes. If members of, I have something that I wish to add, but if anyone else wishes to come in at this point, I will refer to.
Chairman, can I just make a point about the increase in the percentage of the building on Catmore Street? The existing building measures 18 metres across the Catmore Street frontage, and the extension would be 14, so it wouldn't fall in Dublin.
Thank you.
So the plan is inaccurate, Mr. Chairman.
Don't think so.
That's just an indicative plan to show you where the extension is.
Yes,
I'm not saying it's
inaccurate.
Right, I have something to say about this. I'm probably, I think, the only person sitting on this committee who can actually remember Catmore Street as it was, unless Mr. Dale was in his pushchair and particularly observant. Yeah. Unlike our conservation officer, it was a dreadful approach. Even as a child, it was grey, oil splattered, fuming, and the only attractive bit was indeed Scott's Butchers on the corner of the small. Those photos flatter it. It was dreadful. So I don't think that the historic fabric of Oakham was particularly impaired by its demolition. Mr. Huxley's comments on the library, he might be amused to know that it was designed by, we then had the luxury of a county architect, and it was indeed a county architect, Mr. Kennedy, who designed it. So I don't really feel the comments about the historic fabric already being ruined. For me, they carry very little weight. It really does come down to this business of benefit against impact. If I were a member of the public and not sitting on this committee, I would also question in very broad terms that benefit against impact. It might occur to me, and I'm very well aware that I can't introduce this as part of this, it's not material planning, but the demographics of Oakham mean that most young families are likely to be to the north, that the only other provision in Oakham that I'm aware of is to the west of the railway line, the soft play area of Long Row. I do endorse, and I take the point about being cautious about highways, and as I always say on this occasion, I once voted against highways and lived to regret it for the next 15 years. So we have to be extremely cautious. Common sense, however, says that if you are a young parent with 1 or 2 toddlers in tow, this is not a very accessible thing, and I hear all the things about the town centre. I question whether, in fact, the town centre with the development will remain, at least in measurable terms, precisely the town centre, but I realise that is a fairly specious argument. So basically, for me, there are 2 things, and I concur with what's been said about the design. I think a flat roof extension here, I don't entirely go with Mr. Oxley on the original design of the library. I don't think this enhances it. And we are sitting here as a committee to make a subjective decision on those 4 points. From my personal point of view, I don't think there's an undue impact on neighbour amenity. I don't think the traffic thing holds up that common sense would suggest it possibly should. I have real concerns about the design, which again is subjective, but I don't concur with the official view of that. But my main concern is the impact on the conservation area. You have an oasis of calm there, relatively speaking, given the traffic. It is, I think, a real feature of Oakham. I think it will have an impact. I think marginal, which is what the executive summary says, marginally harmful. I would not agree with that. My personal feeling at the moment is that we are looking at long-term loss and short-term gain. I wait to see what the proposals coming forward, but as it stands at the moment, I could not actually support this particular proposal. Mr. Oxley.
I think Mr. Lammy did actually make a proposal earlier.
In that case, I was definitely with it, I'm sorry.
So I said I would be happy to.
I thought you didn't actually make it.
I didn't want to close down any debate.
Thank you. If you're now prepared to make the proposal, I'm happy to take it.
Propose to go with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that? Mr. Wilby. In that case, we vote on that. All those in favour of the proposal as per the report. And against, please. So the proposal falls. I should now make it clear, and I deliberately did not say this at the beginning of the meeting, there is no appeal process, I think I'm correct in saying. What that means, and I think I would say from the chair of this committee to the applicant, should the applicant be reminded to come forward with another proposal, I would like to see in the report an analysis of the alternative sites. I would like to see the postcodes of the users, and I would ideally like to see some consultation with those users. Mr. Flynn, we now have done reasons for.
Chairman, I'd just like to say it will be highly inappropriate for those sort of issues to be put in a planning report. They are not planning matters. If we put them in a planning report and you take them into consideration, as officers, we would have been guilty of misleading you. And if you then use them as part of that decision, you will also be quite wrong to do so. So that is not the place where those matters should be considered. It's not for planning to deal with those issues. So that's the council wearing a different hat than this one.
Thank you. In that case, I will say I will still make those comments, but they probably should go to the cabinet report, which of course all members would then have the opportunity to read. And yes, I'm very well aware, and I'm sure members of the public may be confused by some of the detail. I'm very conscious of the legal opinion and the legal planning opinion, and we have got to be absolutely clear that we're making, and we have made the decision tonight on those specific grounds. And I'm about to ask for the reasons for. We should have a minute for that. Sorry, yeah. No, thank you. Again, I'm in new territory. We now, having that proposal having fallen, would anybody care to propose refusal, please? Mr. Oxley, seconder, please. Sorry, the movie must specify grounds.
On the grounds of design, I don't think the design is appropriate for that part of the town. And also loss of open space, as you mentioned in your
conservation aspect.
Yes, it's very much in the conservation aspect. We mustn't lose sight of the fact it is in the conservation area. It's on an island. and people, anybody who gets to it has to cross the road irrespective. I know the highways don't have a problem with that, but it still, I believe, will impact on the application.
Right. Do I have a seconder for that, please? So I'll just take it on the conclusion line. Sorry, that was seconded from Mr. Thomas. And now we take a second vote. All those in favour, please. Of that. Seven against. Thank you. So that is duly carried by 7.
Recording, please, Chair.
Sorry, that's Mr. Cross.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of interest, we do have members of Cabinet sitting on this committee. They have already deliberated upon this and made their decision in Cabinet. And I just wonder whether it is right and proper.
Mr. Cross, I'm going to stop you there. Legal officer.
So, through you, Chair, Councillor Cross, the particular members that you speak about had already sought monitoring officer opinion and legal advice on whether or not they were able to attend this evening's committee and deliberate on this item, and they were advised that yes, it was perfectly proper.
I agree it's confusing. Mr. Conde.
Sorry, just to reiterate, may I have my vote recording, please?
Sorry, I couldn't actually see who'd asked for that. Yes, certainly. Mr. Conley's vote recorded, yes. I'm going to, if members of the public are very welcome to listen to rather less contentious things that are on the agenda, but if they wish to depart, I will just adjourn for 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Is the Aldi application. Thank you, Mr. Cost, for your concession.
Just looking at the plan here, I was right.
But when were you not?
Well, it's not well technique.
I'm sorry that you feel upset. Right. We now have the Aldi application. You will see from the addendum report that it is done, and I'm going to move from the chair that we defer that without further debate. You can see the addendum report. There are legal complications on 106 and still. So do I have a seconder, please, for deferral? Thank you, Mr. Parsons. All those in favour? Very well. Sorry, Mr. Oxley. Yes. No, I don't want to get into debate.
No, I just wanted to try and ascertain when we could expect to see it coming back, because they're opening next Tuesday.
Mr. Bullock.
We would have to bring that to your next meeting with the issues resolved.
Yeah, no, fine. Sorry, so we can go back to that. Thank you. Again, it's a perfectly fair question. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous, I think. Thank you very much indeed. So we move on to the next one, which is Moorcock. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is Yes, thank you again, Chairman. This final application is for an extension to a detached dwelling in Chesnam. It is recommended to you for approval. Show you the lie of the land. That is the application site down there, identified in red. It's number 16 Bull Lane. You can see up here just about where is High Street going to the centre of the village. This is Bull Lane, then come down, takes a right turn, listed building there at the 10. And then continues along the frontage of the application site here. Beyond that, then there is the Methodist Church and the Methodist Church Hall here. At the end of the carriageway, you then have a footpath that runs through the
On the other side of that is swing, and on the other side of that is the recreation ground. The application site is within the planned limits of development, and it is also within the conservation. Just bringing that to life then with an aerial photograph. That's the lane coming down this way, taking its right turn mentioned earlier. That's the listed building. This is the application site here. The lane comes from an end down here, in front of the Methodist Church and its church hall. And then this is the footpath that runs along the south, adjacent to the stream, and on the other side, the recreation area here. You can see on the existing application site that it's already got one rear extension here at the gable end. It's also got an outdoor swimming pool here. An outbuilding I'll show you later just at the side of it. And again, I forgot to mention earlier, there's a rear conservatory tucked in there. So, looking at the current proposal, what it involves is the removal of that conservatory that I mentioned here to provide a second two-storey rear extension with gable feature. And then on the existing two-storey extension here, there are further extensions coming up to the rear. This is a single-storey link here to be used primarily as a garden room, but then there is a two-storey element beyond that here to provide additional bedroom accommodation. And then across over on this side, the swimming pool is removed, the outbuilding is removed, and then there is a large single-storey flat-roof extension to provide a new covered swimming pool and also gymnasium. Looking at that in more detail, this is the existing ground floor, and again, very briefly, you can see the main element of the house here. That is the two-storey featured rear extension. That's the conservatory. That down there is the swimming pool. That's the outbuilding that I mentioned earlier. That is the first floor, or again, first floor accommodation here, main part of the building there. But then this is the proposal that is in front of you this evening. So, main part of the existing building there, the existing rear extension there. This is the single-storey link element here to be used as a garden room, and this then is the two-storey element beyond that. This here then is the new two-storey extension of the gable feature, and then across here is the new flat-roofed single-storey extension to cover the swimming pool and also the indoor gym. And on the first floor level then, the only thing to point out here is that's the flat roof over the garden room link. That's the two-storey element. That's the flat roof ceiling over the swimming pool and gym. Looking at the extension, looking at the elevations, this is the existing rear. You can see the two-storey extension I mentioned. You can see the conservatory, and then across behind the Methodist Church and its hall, you've then got the outbuilding, and then the swimming pool is tucked in behind the outbuilding and down the wall here. The proposal to consider this evening, first of all, there's the new gabled two-storey rear extension there. There's then the single-storey link beyond the existing gabled rear extension, and I'll show you in the side plan views, but then the two-storey element is forward of that. And then across to the left and south, you can see the outbuilding is gone, and it's been replaced by this building, which covers the swimming pool and the gym. If we look then from the south, this is the existing situation. The main part of the house there, that's the existing rear extension I mentioned. That's the conservatory. You can see here that we've now got a new second rear extension there, which you can see there. You've then got the single-storey link there, and then you've got the two-storey element beyond. But I must stress that is at the other end of the house, beyond the existing rear extension, not beyond the new one that I've shown you here. And then again, you can see the flat roof of the new facilities to cover the swimming pool and the gym. Looking then from the northern side, this is the existing situation where you've got the main house, the extension, that's the outbuilding beyond that. But then what you've got is the main building here, the extension there, another extension behind that. Then the single-storey link for garden room, and then the smaller two-storey element further down the garden there. And just to show you some photographs, apologies for the angle on this one, but so you can again appreciate the existing lie of the land. So two-storey extension, then the conservatory. So this would be extended as single and then double-storey. That would
then if you come round to the right, seeing that at a different angle, the existing extension, so a single-storey link here, and then two-storey there, and then this will be replaced by another gable-ended two-storey extension in this location. And then swinging the camera around to the left again, looking across now to the Methodist Church and its hall, that's the existing swimming pool, and that is the existing outbuilding, both of which will be removed to make way for the proposed single-storey facility at Common. So the key issues for members to consider this evening. First of all, the design of the show and its impact on, first of all, conservation, and then secondly, on the adjacent building. Then the impact on any residential amenity. And I'd like to say just a little bit at the end then regarding the impact on trees. So, if we look first of all at the design and the impact on the conservation area. The conservation area boundary is roughly what you can see coming down here, then heading off this way. So the conservation area is here, and then comes across the stream to the recreation area there. And as members will be aware, as planning authority, there is a special duty on the council to ensure that the character and the appearance of the conservation area is preserved or enhanced or makes any planning decision. It has to be accepted that the collection of extensions that I've described to you are large, they are extensive, but they have been assessed thoroughly by your officers. And we are of the view that despite the bulk and the extent, that the location of them and the screening that is available to them means that we do actually have a very limited impact on the conservation area. We demonstrate that with some photographs, showing first of all the impact here up front, and secondly moving around to any impact from the south. So again, we'll look from the front here, then we look from the south. All of that is within the conservation area. And we could start the journey by coming down Bull Lane here, and the listed building that I mentioned there, number 10, there's an in-stock of views prominent within the conservation area. Bull Lane takes the right turn I mentioned to you. You can see the application site there, across to the right. If you move now to this position, that is the application site. That's its front curtilage. That is its garage behind the Methodist Church and its church hall. The view we're expressing to you is that as all of the proposals in front of you this evening are up the rear, there is no detrimental impact on the front and public part of the conservation. But if we move then to the rear, this is the footpath now at the south of the site. It's a key view that's often used by a lot of people moving through the village heading towards Bull Lane and the lines. The application site is just about in there. It hasn't shown a very lot of lighting this evening, but the application site is in there. This is a summer view, and the advice we're giving you is that that is well screened, and therefore the scheme will have a more limited impact as well from that location. That photograph was actually taken on a bridge, footbridge over the path, or over the stream, sorry, adjacent to the path. I have myself walked a couple of times up and down the footpath, because it's on lower ground than the application site. Again, all the screening and boundary means you don't get much of a view of the application site, and therefore a more reduced impact from end to end. Different situation if you move to the wind. So the photographs taken from more or less the same position there. Clearly, there is now less screening, but again, as I mentioned, the footpath, the key point is lower, which means you get less of a view. What you would see, I think, from the bridge would be the new gable feature extension here, but in the same materials as the existing dwelling. You do not feel that would have a detrimental impact. The single-storey extension down here would hardly be seen, and if you go across to the proposed two-storey element set further back over here, then again there is available screening for that, and it is slightly further away. And finally, another winter shot. Again, the new two-storey extension will be there, with a single-storey tucked behind here, across to the right, lower two-storey further extension. We move then across over the bridge and into the recreation area. This is a close-up view in summer. There is quite a lot of available screening there to see. And again, from this shot, you can see dwelling through there, but it is well screened, which offsets the impact. And this is the same view taken in autumn. I took this photograph only yesterday, and again you can see the application site there. But given the distance, given the screening that even in the autumn does offset the impact of the road, we do feel that we could not mount an argument to you that that has any detrimental impact on the conservation area. And then finally, further back winter scene, again the extension will be, as I mentioned, across this area here, but given the distance, given the softening even in winter of those trees, you do not gain feel without any argument that it's having a detrimental impact. So we then look at the impact on the distance. This is the application site here, that's number 10, this building there. And again, as with conservation areas, when it comes to an impact on the setting of this building, the council does have a special duty to make sure that it considers that setting. Given the distance, and given that a lot of the proposals in front of you this evening are either single story or where the two story are tucked in behind the main two part of the existing building, we do not feel that anything there has any impact on the setting of the listed building here. Greater considerations ought to be given to this element here, the single story and the two story. But given the distance, it is 31 metres across here, given that it does recede down in level here, given that it is set back from the boundary, given that it is slightly angled away, the impact of that on the listed building, we feel, is not one that is detrimental. And then if we look at this aerial photograph, I won't repeat the same points again, but that's the listed building. It itself has already had an extension at the rear there, and then there are also these other buildings here within this immediate environment. So what I've just described to you down here, in that context, we feel does not have a detrimental impact on that setting. Just to show you that more closely, this is taken from the rear corner of the existing building on 16. That's the listed building there, that's its extension. Further back, you can see the two again. Bear in mind, the nearest part of the collection proposal in front of you this evening to that listed building will be down here, just in front of the building. And then a wider panorama there, making the same point. We move then to our next issue, which is the potential impact on residential amenity. No concerns regarding anything here, again, focus on the same extensions here. There have been objections raised from neighbouring residents, but as I showed you on the elevations, there is no fenestration here at first floor level other than one window. And that window is supposed to be obscure glazed, and there's a condition recommended to you to ensure that. So given that, again, these extensions are away from the boundary, oriented slightly away, and given the distances as well, 31 metres there, 30 metres there, the other neighbouring property, we do not feel that has an impact on their residential amenity through loss of life, open area impact, loss of privacy, or any of those other concerns. And then, my final issue, tree protection. We draw your attention here to some of the existing trees, which you will have seen my earlier photographs taken from the south. They are prominent, they do make a contribution to the conservation. When the scheme first came in, the proposed extension of this area did encroach into the root protection areas. This revisions that were made to the scheme before we brought this to now move the extension away from the root protection areas, but there is still a need to have the area protected. And so there is a condition recommended for approval that tree protection measures and exclusion zone around there are part of the construction process. And just to say that there they are there, one view taken from the applicant's garden, and then another view again. You can see from the height that they do make a considerable contribution. And then finally, Chairman, I'll take you briefly to the addendum report. We did receive some comments regarding construction mapping and the impact of this. As you're aware, there is not a planning issue to be considered to be controlled via the planning application process. However, we are recommending a note to him regarding how to go about constructing the plan of vehicles or other materials obstructing the right of way. And again, point out on this plan, there is quite a large front curve to these two properties. So really there is opportunity there for anything to come off the road and avoid what we accept is a narrow road avoiding that being obstructed. So that's on the addendum report, Chairman. And then finally, taking you to the conclusions, the key issues are there. The design, despite it being such a large collection of extensions, the design, the impact of that on the conservation area, on the adjacent listed building, on residential amenity and on trees are subject to the conditions we're recommending all acceptable. Therefore, Chairman, it is recommended to you to
Thank you very much, Mr. Gear. Mr. Conde.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that detailed report. There are several issues that I would like to highlight where on the addendum about the public use adjacent right of way, I would like to see that advisory to also cover the chapel's services, which are midweek and during the week, and that perhaps consideration should be given to the construction itself, perhaps ceasing whilst those are going on. The other time would be school times for access. That is the second most major access point for the school, which isn't actually shown on the colour drawings. Marks the playing field, that's the school playing field in the bottom left-hand corner. And as I say, school times, lots of children up and down that road, so perhaps to avoid those school times for the construction traffic. Sink Stream, which is the stream that runs to Aldgate from the top there, I don't know whether they were actually consulted, but Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust maintain and manage that ecosystem in the stream and along the banks, and there are certain special habitats down there as well. So it would be perhaps being only right. When we talk about the visual amenity, if one actually follows it down to the very bottom of the property and across the major bridge into Aldgate, which is within the conservation area, they're looking straight up that garden, and there are several properties there that just look straight up their attic. I appreciate that distance might be a mitigating factor on that. Just have a check. Oh yes, having looked at the spring, the southeast corner behind the chapel, and coming to the decision that it wouldn't have much impact. Well, when they actually did the building, since after that, the initial building, after that and since, the egress of water from there has been much more, to the extent of flooding over the path into the Sink Stream, proving very dangerous in winter. And there were also issues when we talked about the chapel. It wasn't so much of the chapel, but the brick extension at the back of the chapel where the stream comes out. They had issues then with having to repoint some of that brick. It's either brickwork or blockwork. It's just that new bit that's stuck on the back of the chapel itself. Bull Lane, as has been pointed out, is very narrow. Has anything been noted regarding parking for what would obviously be extra people living in the house? Then, has something made available? You cannot park really on Bull Lane and allow another vehicle to go past. And again, I agree with you having pointed out through the photographs that the different times of year, then the actual visual impact is very different. And if we take a mean average, then I do agree with the findings there.
Thank you. Would you like to come back on any of those, Mr. Gill? I'm still having a meeting, I know.
Chairman, just to pick up on a few of those points. Yes, first of all, I've got to be guarded in my response regarding control of construction traffic, because it can only be an advisory note, it can be controlled with the planning system. However, if members were minded to resolve to approve the scheme and wish some additions to that note, that would be appropriate at note. Regarding visual amenity and views from the distance, yes, I do take the point. But given the distance and given the context of those views as well, with other developments in the area, then I don't think we could conclude that that view, the rear of the current collection of proposals, would be an acceptable positive impact on the conservation area. In terms of parking, there is a fair amount of room, as I mentioned earlier, in the front curtilage, and I think that is adequate to cope with any additional parking that might be generated by this extension being constructed. And in terms of the wildlife impact on the stream, I'm aware that the Wildlife Trust does have interest in the recreation area in the area around there. Nothing specific was picked up during the consultations on this application, and therefore I can't bring anything to the committee this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibb. Do you want to come back, Mr. Gondier?
Yes, please, Chair. I would certainly like that when this proposal comes forward, that we do put an advisory, or however it is actually worded, regarding construction traffic. I was photographed here the last time that was done, and no vehicles were able to get in and out of there for 4 hours to access their own homes. It is that difficult to get, as you're aware, to get down Potter's Lane and get around that little bit of a corner. So I really think that the advisory as regards to school, advisory as regards to Cheltenham, but have we only ever issued advisories as regards construction traffic?
I'm a little bit concerned about a photograph being circulated. This is, I don't believe we should actually be taken into consideration as it has been presented to us.
I think you were quite correct. I was just taking the look myself as well.
Okay. Yeah, somebody actually removed it.
Indeed, I apologise unreservedly. I didn't realise that was the case.
Sorry, Mr. Conley, continue with your other point.
No, it was just that, do we have any stronger way of managing the construction traffic? Because as we have perhaps in other areas with similarly difficult access.
I think I used it when I did the last members training, put the slide out when you were looking at material considerations. Well, I used as a slide that was endorsed by CLG, Communities and Local Government, and that said it's not a planning matter. So you have to set that aside. You may be concerned by it, but it's not something for us to control.
Mr. Lammy, you've been very patient.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, looking at planning assessment for the issues, I'm content with the application effect on trees and the residential community. What I do have concern about is the introduction of such a large amount of flat roof built into the conservation area, and especially on the proportionate size to the actual building. That's a large square meterage, and also the form. I can speak about it.
Yes, I think
The form on the right hand side, where we go from the main property down to a flat with 1 story and then up to 2 story. It doesn't seem, and I know by doing it 1 story, it sort of mitigates the residential amenity issues with it. But that is my only concern. It seems there were going to be roof lights, flat building with roof lights on it, and that's my concern, is how we're keeping such a large extension of the flat roof in a conservation area.
Would you like to come back?
Chairman, the comment about such an extensive flat roof is acknowledged, and in many conservation area situations, I don't think we would include that in any recommendation to you for approval. However, we always have to ask the question, what is the impact on the wider conservation area, and what is the potential harm that could be caused by this? And as I mentioned when I took you on a photographic tour around the site, whilst there is a large extent of flat roof, we don't feel that it will be visible from any there's key locations that show you. Therefore, does it cause harm? No. Therefore, does it have that wider impact on the conservation area? Wider negative impact? The answer again is no. So coming back to my very first point about conservation area, at least it preserves, even if it may not enhance, its character and appearance.
Do you want to go back? Yeah, the issue I did write down is preserve or enhance the conservation area. Preserve the swimming pool, but conservation area.
So just for clarity on the comment there, Chairman, what we're going to consider is whether or not any proposal preserves or enhances the character and appearance of the conservation area. And the point is that whilst we acknowledge that it's a large area or flat roof, it at least preserves the character because it has no negative impact on it because it is highly.
Mr. Dale, then Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't particularly like that extension with the flat bit, but could I ask about this swimming pool? Could we go back to the view of it before and after? I'd just like to know the height that the swimming pool will be. Will it impact on the windows of the church hall or church? Is it going to be higher than what's there?
We've answered that in 2 slides, please, Chairman. Stay on the existing.
No, you've got a view of it.
Indeed, yes, which I'd like to come to in a moment.
Sorry.
Just to make sure I give you a full answer. This is the plan view. So a flat roof extends the site boundary there. There is then a gap at the rear before we get to the church hall here. Yes, the church hall does have a series of windows here. They are at a reasonably high level, but if I can then go back to the proposed extension, we can look at the relationship of 2. Bear with me, I'll take it slowly, I don't want to overshoot.
Yeah, just at the bottom, you see, it doesn't show the chapel there or the windows there, and they are south-facing windows. And is it going to obscure the light from those windows?
Chairman, I'm afraid the technology isn't doing us any favours here, but just about make out some of the image of the rear there that does show.
Oh, sorry.
No, it is very faint, so it's understandable that anyone would think it's not actually shown on the drawing. But the hard copy I have on the file does indicate the church hall here. Now, if you look at the windows there, those are the relatively high-level windows that I mentioned. Look how they line up here to the side of the existing building. So if we then start at that point and come across, then the lower part of those buildings will actually be lower than the flat roof of those here. The remaining windows will be above it, but of course there will be that distance between the two.
Thank you.
Mr. Robson.
Yes, coming back to the point made by the ward member with regards to the spring, it is mentioned in the report that the Ketton Parish Council, the committee was concerned about natural spring at the southeast corner being affected by groundworks and the foundations of the chapel. And the ward member did report that since the construction of this building, number 16, they had problems with the spring going across the footpath. So, are there any plans to do something with regards to drainage? Springs are notorious for springing up. I know we have the same problem in Uppingham, where developments have moved springs further down the valley, and I wouldn't want to see any increase in the flow of those springs as to the detriment of the neighbouring community as a result of this development.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 18 of the report, the final paragraph there does address that issue. And you can see that the case officer has undertaken a number of investigations. And we have to bear in mind that that area above the stream has trees being developed, as has been mentioned, the swimming pool the outbuilding. And so it's not as if we have a situation where there is ground that is perhaps allowing water to soak away, and now we're having a hard surface that would deflect more water down towards the stream. So from the information in front of us, from a planning point of view, we feel that the current scheme is acceptable and would net significantly to the current concerns.
Well, just like I said, I did read that point, but given the fact that it is freezing over in the winter and concrete is no substitute for earth, and if we're talking about putting more hard surfaces into an area where there already are issues with springs, I am concerned that it may very well have a detrimental effect. We may increase the flow of the spring. There are going to be bigger buildings, larger buildings. There's a big difference between a swimming pool and a covered area, which is going to have footings put in and everything else. So that's one thing that I must say that I am concerned about.
Yes,
I think you've got to disassociate the fact that there may be an issue with the existing spring, because that's an existing problem caused by an existing building, not this. The drainage from this building will be controlled through the building regulations. And they will need to ensure that whatever they do it through soakaways and probability, that works satisfactorily under the building regulations. And that's how the drainage, the roofs, etc. of this building will be done. That's for us.
I want to make that point, just for that point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I be excused?
Of course, Mr. Parsons, yes.
Would you sit on adjourn for a moment to take a vote? Yes, I will adjourn. Yes. Mr. Lamb, you got anything else? Mr. Lamb, sorry, I really somebody in that direction.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, no, you're just seeing sort of that picture. It does bring it home. The actual one I was, to me, the extent of the change on the left-hand side is moved from a summer house in an open garden area to a one-storey wing of the property. So, and I would say the length would probably double the current building. And it just, given sitting on the committee, how many conservation areas, planning applications for this, as in its keywords, it doesn't preserve or enhance it. It's, I would say, that there would be that many. I can think of one story, having campaigned around Ketton a number of times, many large one story extensions to a building definitely of that extent. So I would, that's just highlights for me. I will be voting for refusal.
Mr. Bullock. Can I just clarify, because I think the term is misleading the way it's used in the Act. It says preserve or enhance. What the courts have done interpreting that is they use the word harm. So preserve doesn't mean leaving things alone, as probably what most people would think that word means. It actually means, does it actually cause harm? If it's neutral, then there's no harm. What we would have to choose to refuse it is what harm that causes to the conservation area. So you'd have to say, you know, it's problem in views from X, it harms because of its materials and they're visible from Y. You'd have to be clear on what that harm is. One of the difficulties I have, as we spoke at the end of last committee, I would need to bring a report back to next committee, because where we've been reducing harm in conservation area, we haven't been winning many of late. And that's one of the things I'll bring back to next committee. So I think having been working on that, well, we need to be very clear exactly what that harm is, because we may need to explain that very clearly to an inspector where that position of harm comes from.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Cross.
Are there any comments about the actual roofing on those flat areas? Are they going to be sort of like semi-natural?
Chairman, those are the cedar roof, which is a green roof.
Well, I think we've debated. Sorry, Mr. Keith.
Chairman, my one concern with the application is this isolated two-storey building. I can't understand why that's been brought forward, or why our officers are not challenging it in some way. It does constitutes a very unusual building. I accept the fact that largely the fact that the chapel is not going to be seen. So I accept the view of that harm. But that other building will be seen, one of two neighbouring buildings. Can we see the floor plan of that two-storey building, please?
That's the first floor element that's there, and I think I've got the ground floor here. Would that suffice there? That's.
Well, I'd like to be clear whether this is additional accommodation to the substantive house, or whether it's in some ways a separate living block altogether. It does seem very strange. We'd be isolated from the main building. But in normal circumstances, everyone we've hardly ever seen on this committee. We're only there for more than a dozen years. It would have been attached to the main building and subservient. This is anything but. It's standalone, looks incongruous to me, and not in a keep with the rest of the village. I just don't understand the logic why we find that acceptable in this case.
Chairman, this was considered, got some detail by the case officer in discussion with Mr. Boyd and other colleagues, and our starting position was just that. It does appear to be a strange way of extending the property, and it potentially does look incongruous. We come back again to the point Mr. Fuller made a moment ago about analysing the exact harm that a proposal may cause. Now, that two-storey element there may be 2 stories, but it is lower in height than the 2-storey of the existing rear extension. It is then set further back from the building, so it could, in some areas, appear like it was an outbuilding to the main building. Then, in terms of direct impact, maybe on neighbours, and also on views from the conservation area that does extend into the neighbouring, it is set back from the boundary. It is, as I say, of lower height than the main part of the building. The only window there at the first floor level is subject to the condition they're recommending. So we went through the same thought process as officers before putting this recommendation forward. It is certainly not something you see very often, something that we wouldn't recommend to you without giving it that level of consideration. But again, coming back to the point, what is the direct harm it will cause, and could a reasoned refusal be mounted on those grounds?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gale. Any other comments from anybody, or are we at the stage where you take a proposal, please?
Proposed refusal.
Proposed refusal. Do I have a second on that, please? No, that doesn't. Sorry, you're seconding that refusal. Yes, and on what grounds, please, Mr. Conley?
On grounds of certainly visual amenity. Also, sorry, what's the word for describing?
So to bring this in, my understanding, if we put visual amenity in, I will be concerned putting visual amenity in, I believe, if the impact on the neighbouring properties isn't significant, and I think we could be in danger of losing appeal on that if we include it. My main concerns is the effect on the conservation area, 1 story, and as highlighted by Mr. King, the nature and form of the 2-story element on the north of it. So I wouldn't want to widen it out too much in case they agree with us on one and then fall down on the other.
Are you content with that, Mr.
I would be happy to withdraw the visual amenity.
Right. So, can we have it absolutely clear what the
Can I just clarify, is the concern about the impact on the conservation area solely from the 2-story element of the rear?
The 2-story element of the rear and also the introduction of such a 1-story element.
So the amount of it?
The amount of it, yes.
So it's scale and height in broad terms.
The scale and the form of it as well. I think the form is in keeping with the conservation area.
Right, we have that proposal, which has been due a second for refusal. All those in favour of that, please. And against? And abstentions? That duly falls, so may we have another proposal, Mr.
I
Person?
move for approval of the officers.
As per the officer's report. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Mr. Mann. And all those in favour of that, please? And against? And abstentions? So that is duly approved. We just have the appeals report, which I'll have to go into.
It was recommended for refusal at the August meeting, but was then deferred for further discussions. It's now been substantially redesigned and is back to receiving the recommendation for approval. Just to show you the line plan there, that is the village of Moorcock. The site itself is outside the village and therefore it can be open countryside. It's on the A47 here, running from east to west, just south of the village, and is part of a cluster of roadside facilities here that include a hotel, a petrol filling station and shop, and then the application site itself in there. Showing to you in close up, there's the A47 there, that is the hotel, that is the petrol filling station and shop there, and then this is the former Little Shed premises here in the middle, and currently trading as the Country Lounge, Cafe and Bar. Just to give you a further close-up then of the premises itself, it's single-storey at the front there, two-storey element here, and then a two-storey extension out the back, as of the time when the planning application was submitted to you. Just looking at the ground floor facilities, the main entrance is there. This is a single-storey element. That is the dining area here, kitchen facilities across there on this side, other ancillary facilities elsewhere. And this is the elevations at the time the application was submitted. You can see again in front, the single-storey element that I referred to, main entrance there. That is the two-storey element then to the rear. Moving around to the west side, you can see the two-storey element here with a further two-storey extension at the rear, and then at the rear you can see here with its asymmetric roof style. It would be fair to say that as a design, it is not particularly appropriate in Rutland. It is a mixture of various design elements and also a mixture of various different materials. This is a photograph of the front at the time the application was submitted. Again, you can see the single-storey flat roofed element at the front, the main entrance there, two-storey elements to the rear. We've got all this timber cladding here. Again, not an appropriate Rutland feature. Moving around to the side, you can see the two-storey element there, and just about see a little bit of the extension beyond that. So that was the situation at the time the planning application was submitted earlier this year. So let's have a look at the revised proposal that's in front of you in consideration this evening. That is the main entrance there, that's the single-storey element. That then is the two-storey, and that is the extension of the rear. The proposal in front of you this evening is for a larger two-storey extension at the side, running from the forward of the existing front elevation down the sidelines, dropping slightly in level as it comes back along the rear elevation there. And it also proposes that there's a new gable feature over the front entrance there. And I think what it illustrates that very clearly is to compare the existing and proposed roof plans. So there is the existing roof plan. You can see here the two-storey extension running down like so, then coming back along the rear extension there, and then that new gable feature also at the front. In terms of facilities that will provide, you can see here the front entrance. That's the existing facility there. Additional dining area there within the side extension and within the rear extension. But some of the kitchen facilities then relocated across to the rear, like so. And I want to show you as well upstairs. Main stairs here through the extension. Gallery feature here, but then at the rear there are some proposed staff accommodation, which I'll return to shortly. These then are the elevations. So looking at the front, and comparing again to what I've shown you already, that is the two-storey side extension there. That's the gable feature over the extension. And you can see now how that is more dominant in comparison to the existing poorer quality building. But I will return to the design features and the concept behind those features later on, Chair. And again, just a quick one while we're here, that is the now more imposing western elevation. So the main issues for you to consider, first of all, the principal development in the open countryside, and secondly, the design of the proposal and the impact of that on the countryside character. So if we look first of all at the principle, members will be aware that local plan policy imposes considerable restraint on development in the open countryside. Only a limited range of development sites are considered acceptable, but amongst those is the expansion of an existing rural business, visitor facilities, and also roadside services. So if we then look at the live land in that cluster of facilities, it is a collection of roadside and visitor facilities between the catering outlet and the hotel and the petrol station and shop. It's on a strategic route through the county, and it is a proposed, the application in front of you is a proposed expansion of that catering outlet, and therefore, in that context, it is considered to be acceptable in principle. And if we just as well look back again at the staff accommodation at first floor level, that may be persons to stay overnight, but it is an ancillary facility to the main use as the catering outlet, and therefore that is also considered to be acceptable. But if we move then to my second key item, which is its design and the impact on the open countryside. And if we start here with a photograph across the frontage of the cluster of facilities, there's the hotel, there's the existing cafe bar there, and that then is the petrol station and shop. And you can see from that despite being this very key location within the county, it is actually a very functional set of buildings that do not take any reference to Rutland vernacular. They are functional buildings. And if we look at the existing building at the time when the application was submitted, once again, that is inappropriate in such a key Rutland location. The mixed materials that I described and also the various clashing design elements are not appropriate, and we think it would be fair to say to you that that building has not been well served in the past by the various works that have been undertaken to it. So that leaves us in a position where we see the current application as an opportunity to address that, to overcome those issues, and help this site to move forward more appropriately. So, looking then at the design concept and how it tries to address that, in most circumstances, I think your officers would say to you that any extension needs to be subservient to the main building. That's the key design principle. But in this particular situation, where we are trying to find something more appropriate, where we are trying to right past problems, it is appropriate to say to you that that concept should be turned around the other way. What we have here is an extension that now becomes the most dominant and appropriate part of the redeveloped site. It's new, it's more appropriate, and as a result, the poorer quality existing building then recedes. So all of this, bearing in mind it protrudes forward, becomes the new key element, the new key focus. This poorer quality feature here then recedes. This is the side elevation from the west, which again is prominent in views from the front. You can see there that it's much larger, much tidier, much more appropriate than the existing. I'll come to the back and the other side in just a moment. But in looking at what would then be the key element here, it is endeavouring to take some reference from the traditional Rutland barn. It would be fair to say the proportions aren't entirely accurate in that regard, but the fact that it protrudes forward, the fact that it is the height that it is, that it uses ironstone, and also in terms of its openings, such as here, takes some reference from the Rutland barn, we consider that that is a step forward from what is there at the moment. So looking at that, and also looking here at this gabled feature, that helps to, if you like, stretch the new, better quality front extension further across to the right, to the east. It therefore also helps to reduce the detrimental impact of the existing building there. And again, at the rear, I'll compare that against to something else in a moment. We think that even though that is hidden from main public view, some thought has to be returned, and that is better than something I'll show you in just a moment. So all told, we do feel that not only is the principle of development acceptable, we do feel that this revised scheme makes a better design setting and it's more appropriate in the Rutland context. But I do, Chairman, have to briefly touch on the scheme that was initially selected and would have been recommended to you for refusal at your August meeting had it not been for the deferral. That is it here. Now, just to give you a critique on that, it again has its main elements on the left-hand side, on the western side of the existing building. But where the current proposal comes forward and creates a more dominant new impact, this one is actually receded, leaving the detrimental impact of the existing building still in place. It also elongates it. I appreciate why things show on the screen here, that's not always obvious, but on plan view, that is more elongated and therefore, in our view, worsens the existing character of the frontage here. If you then come round to the side, what we've got is two gable features here and here. Neither are particularly appropriate or balanced in their design, adjacent to each other, clashing. And as I mentioned earlier, that elevation is also common. And so we do feel that having those two competing elements is not appropriate and better could be done, as has been the Then also at the rear, whilst this is not the most prominent part of the building, did have for the staff accommodation all those large windows, a balcony, two staircases external, and also stretching of the roof. We also felt that was inappropriate. Plus, by introducing two new materials, albeit perhaps appropriate, but in addition to allowing all the existing materials here to remain visible, that it was actually creating too much of a clutter of materials that again detrimental to the So, just having a look then at the potential impact of that. Of course, as members may be aware, development did actually commence in advance of the August meeting. So that is the situation at the time the application was submitted. That is the front view with part of that side extension in place. We see it's receded, still leaving this inappropriate stuff standing proud. Then if you look at the side, that was the existing situation earlier this year. That is now the start of those two inappropriate gables. Bearing in mind, this one's taller and is yet to be finished off. And then if you look further back, this is the view coming out of the adjacent hotel. That will be facing any visitors to us using the hotel and perhaps then going to the cafe bar. Bear in mind that will also be taller. We feel that is inappropriate in a Rutland context. And just then to pick up on a small point of detail, if we could just focus on that area there, you can see that the side extension doesn't actually butt up to the existing building like so, and there's a close-up of it. So again, just a small point of detail, but again, one of the reasons why we had recommended prior to the deferral that previous scheme for refusal. So coming back to the current scheme, comparing that then against what I've just shown you, this now makes a much, much better face for the building, much more appropriate in context. This then recedes. We've got something that is much better coordinated, takes much more of a Rutland reference than what you had seen on the scheme that was partially commenced. So having done the comparison there, Chairman, I'll just briefly take you then to your addendum report. 2 points to mention there. First of all, an incorrect certification plan was given to you for May 10 plans. The corrected plan is now actually given. And secondly, in paragraph 29 of the main report, it was uncovered at that stage what the materials would be able to show the main. I cannot confirm that that is the same ironstone as on the two-story side extension. So all of that said, Chair, the conclusion from your officers is that the principle of development is acceptable, the design has a positive impact Therefore, Chairman, the recommendation to you is that we're seeking democratic policy to approve the scheme at the end of the reconsultation period, which runs out in 2 days' time.
Thank you very much indeed. As I represent the ward, let's crack at that. Again, as Mr. Gear said, should we approve this tonight, there are 2 days technically to run. Referring to paragraph 7, Moorcote Parish Council, no objections. We did in fact receive a communication which appeared to be from the parish council. As I'm aware of the way they deal with their planning applications, I did phone the clerk, and it was in fact the comments of one member of the parish council, not actually the parish council. The clerk is well aware of this, and again, because they were concerned about the retrospective element, if you like, I think the officers made it perfectly clear that this planning will simply supersede. It may well involve relatively minor knocking down of something that's already been put up. But from my point of view, I don't think there's any question on the principle. It's an existing use. It is merely making that more efficient or viable. Mr. Gear chose a rather polite term when he said the existing buildings were functional. My vocabulary wouldn't be so kind, and I think this is a huge improvement, this thing. So from a design point of view, I think it actually makes the site far, far better. But I'll listen to what other members have to say. Mr. Condell and Mr. Oxford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, not far from my board. But I think what it also does is it mitigates the closure and sale of the White Horse pub, which was the only drinking facility in the village. So this is now the only pub in the village. And whilst I appreciate that may carry no planning weight at this stage, then maintaining a business like that when it becomes the last one, I believe does.
Thank you. Mr. Oxford.
Thanks, Chairman. All the comments so far have been with regards to design. I have concerns with regards the increased traffic that this could potentially create. And where are those vehicles going to park? If we look at the plan that's in the addendum, it shows that the entry slip roads, presumably that means they are in the ownership of the applicant. Is that correct?
Chairman, the entry slip roads are partially the ownership of the applicants. The other users there also have ownership claim with them, and that's why notice has been served on them in the usual way. To answer specifically Mr. Oxley's point, those are shared ownership arrangements and are within the application.
Thank you. If I may carry on. I know this site well. I frequently get petrol there on the way to Peterborough and the way back. And I noticed with alarm the fact that the building had started when I knew that we had refused. So I was pleased to see that there was a subsequent application put through. I'm not sure how it's going to actually, I mean, what has been built, I would suggest there's going to be substantial demolition work will need to be done in order to meet the requirements of any permission which has been given here. And I would like to ensure that, or be assured, that those changes will take place and building will not carry on just putting up what they didn't have permission to do before. So I need assurances of that. I'd also like to have a look at the floor plan of the new application, if we may, because I believe that looking at it, yes, no, carry on, sorry. That's the one, yeah. So the application, the extension is going to be almost entirely dining area. So that, I would suggest that means that they are going to be doubling the size, potentially, of clients. And will there be sufficient parking on site? If all of those, if they were to book a wedding, for example, which they could possibly do on that site, is there going to be ample parking to ensure that all of those people are parked on the road, off the road, adjacent to the premises and not blocking access to the other motel and to the garage and the petrol station, which I use frequently. So I think that is potentially a material consideration, in my opinion, if they haven't stipulated an increased allocation of spaces in order to mitigate what may happen if that was a full premises.
Mr. Neal, would you like to come back on that? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just perhaps pick up 3 points Mr. Oxley has made there. First of all, just a technical point, this is the same application, it's revised plans on that application, the previous one. The previous scheme didn't proceed to a decision because of deferral. Secondly, I understand the point about developing in accordance with the approved plans. If permission is granted, then the approved plans will be specified by condition. Any variance from that could lead the applicant to enforcement action. And then thirdly, looking at the parking arrangements, if members would look at your plan there in the addendum report, you can see within the red line there are parking spaces available to both the west and the east of the proposal, and there's parking spaces also available in front in that little area within the red line closest to the A47. The total number of spaces are considered acceptable for associated sort. There's no objection from the Highway Authority, and our particular point about functions, going back to what I was saying earlier about this being a complementary cluster of facilities, I'd imagine for anything like a wedding, there may well be guests staying at the hotel. So therefore, there will be competing demands on it.
Okay. Anyone else, Mr. Cross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, again, I would like to congratulate the officers on the presentation, and also the work that has gone in to enable a pretty good outcome under the circumstances. So I would say thank you very much indeed, and when the time comes, I should be very pleased to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Is there anybody else who wishes to add? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mann.
Will the old part of the building also be improved, or is it just more or less status quo?
The current application doesn't include any changes to the old part of the building, which is one of the reasons why we saw the design for this extension, that actually dominated the old part of the building and made it proceed as far as we can into the back road and reduce the impact.
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the new design plan is far better than there is. Personally, I think little impact to the countryside, and welcome the growth of the business and investment to this area.
Mr. Cross, I think you were ready to propose.
I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder, please? Mr. Lammy. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you. And finally, to Captain on the applications. The next meeting, which will address some of the concerns I think you made up on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I will deal with most of it in that report, but I think one decision is quite standout, which is the one at 3.7 that I contrasted to. Because the inspector found that our policy was out of date in relation to housing, did not accept it, went therefore to the National Planning Policy Framework rather than our policies, held that the location was sustainable, even though it was in a very small hamlet, but sustainable on the basis of its proximity to Cranston itself and to Stamford and all the facilities in Stamford. Wasn't the decision we really expected, and I think there is a lesson out that until we have the new local plan in place, we are going to get odd decisions like this when the inspectors are not going to uphold our policy. This, in context, wasn't possibly the worst one to lose. We may get others that are much more sensitive we do lose on the same judgment that the inspectors made there. So I just thought I brought that one to attention because I suspect that might be the last we might see one like that.
Mr. King.
Chairman, to all members attending to the fact of the Harrier Close decision, which is about as far away from the toll bar decision you can get, i.e. more than 800 metres from the village, then the plan inspector deemed it wasn't sustainable and refused. And clearly, we're now subject to individual inspectors can have different sides of the bed. I think the bed would not be in shape, a normal bed shape, because the number of different decisions we get is amazing. But also, the view on conservation areas, which I know we have separate report on, but they don't a different view on conservation areas, the one I think most people think is appropriate. But I do, and a warning for everybody, that Harrier Close, off the back of this, if I was the developer reading this, I'd come back with a Harrier Close application, slightly less. And I think I'd argue that there's a precedent in this one.
Yeah, I think it's quite very well made. Anybody else want to comment on anything? In that case, 20 minutes past 8. Thank you for a very thorough debate on the meeting.